Last time I asked a fairly practical question. What is AI and what will it never be? We said it's pattern recognition and probability. It can simulate thought, but it cannot be thought. It will never have consciousness, moral agency, or love. And today I want to press into the deepest layer of that never. Because here's the trick. Anyone can say AI will never be human. That's easy. The interesting question is why. What is it about a human person that an artificial system cannot become, no matter how much data we feed it, no matter how many parameters we train, no matter how convincingly it speaks? My claim today is straightforward. AI can be extraordinarily capable. It cannot cross the ontological boundary that makes a human person a subject, someone, rather than a something. Today, I want to show you why. From philosophy of mind, from the work of a Canadian Jesuit named Bernard Lonergan, one of the great geniuses of the 20th century, and also from an anthropology that refuses to reduce human persons to patterns. So we need to name the stakes clearly. AI systems today are astonishing. We know that, we all see it. They can simulate understanding, they can generate language that sounds deeply human, they can express what looks like emotion. You can ask a model about its thoughts, and it will tell you very convincingly how it feels about the question. Here's the key sentence, though, to hold on to. Simulation is not subjectivity. Just because something looks intelligent doesn't mean it possesses interior life. Pattern behavior is not consciousness. You can build a system that models the appearance of thought. That doesn't mean it has an inner eye, a center of awareness that knows itself as a self. And this isn't just a technical detail, it's a moral and a theological one. Because the human person isn't an information processor with extra steps. We just aren't there yet. We are beings made in the image and likeness of God, capable of knowledge, freedom, and love, not data analysis. So when we start blurring the line between person and artifact, between someone and something, we risk forgetting what a person actually is. We risk treating humans as if they were machines and machines as if they were human. That confusion doesn't only mean losing or undermining our sense of purpose and relationships. It undermines our sense of meaning. So the question, can AI ever be human, is really a question about us, not about AI. About whether we will still remember who we are. So, to get our bearings, start with a distinction philosophers often make. They talk about the easy problems and the hard problems of consciousness. The so-called easy problems aren't really that easy, they're just mechanical. How does the brain integrate sensory data? How does attention work? How does memory consolidate? How do neural circuits support behavior? These are immensely difficult questions. Neuroscience can at least attempt to answer these problems, which are very, very difficult, because they concern function. They concern structure. They concern mechanism. But then there's the hard problem, if those easy ones weren't hard enough. The hard problem asks why any of this processing should be accompanied by subjective experience at all. Why does seeing red feel like anything at all? Why does pain hurt rather than simply registering as a damage signal? Why is there a felt quality of a what it is like dimension that's attached to this neural activity? Why is there an inner point of view? Human beings live from the inside out. we don't just process inputs, we experience them. Consciousness isn't data integration. It's a life as it is lived from within. By contrast, today's AI operates from the outside in. It performs mathematical transformations on representations, what engineers call tensors and symbolic vectors. It manipulates data with breaking speed and complexity. But nowhere in that process does a qualitative experience arise. There's no first person there. And the difference between these becomes clear when we change the question. Instead of asking, what does the system do? We ask who, if anyone, is there for whom anything appears. The honest answer is no. No one. There's no who inside the machine. There's only computation. And that tiny shift from what to who is the moment philosophy and theology enter the conversation. Because only a person can ask, what is it like to be me? Here, Bernard Lonergan becomes very useful. Lonergan, as I mentioned, was a 20th century Canadian Jesuit philosopher and theologian. His work on cognition is, in my view, the single most powerful framework for thinking clearly about the difference between a human knower and a computational system. For Lonergan, consciousness isn't a vague glow of awareness. It's intentional and it is structured. Intentional means it is always directed toward something. It is awareness of. It is about the world, about meaning, about reality. Structured means it unfolds in distinguishable, cooperating levels. And Lonergan notices something quite profound. Human knowing is intrinsically self-transcending. It is not flat. It rises through levels in a dynamic upward movement. First, we experience. We take in data from the world. That is, sights and sounds and impressions and feelings. Then we understand. We ask questions. We search for patterns. We reach for insights, that eureka, aha moment, I got it. And then we judge. We weigh whether our understanding is true, whether it actually corresponds to reality. And then, and only then, do we decide. We choose what to do with what we have learned. And this integration across levels yields what no chain of computation can ever yield: a self. It's not just a bundle of functions. A person who can say, I had that insight, I verified it, I chose. Because we can appropriate our own acts, because we can look back and recognize our own knowing and deciding. We become responsible. We become moral agents. An AI, by contrast, stacks functions. It takes in data, it applies an algorithm, it produces an output. Repeat and repeat and repeat. There is no center unifying those acts into a life. There is no I appropriating its own actions. No subject who is responsible for its own knowing and doing. And that's the crucial difference here. The crucial difference that Lonergan helps us to see. A person unifies acts into a life. AI chains operations together. And Lonergan takes this point further. He identifies what he calls the 4 interlocking levels of consciousness, 4 movements of the human spirit that together make knowing and acting possible. First, as we mentioned, experiencing. The raw encounter with reality, with sensation and perception and memory and imagination. The world pressing in on us. The colors, sounds, feelings, and images. The second is understanding. That restless, curious why that won't leave us alone. We start looking for patterns, asking questions, reaching for insight, asking, what does this mean? How does it work? That hunger to understand is one of the most beautiful signs of our humanity. And third, judging. We weigh our insights, test them, ask, is this true? Does this really correspond to reality? And this is where intelligence meets humility, the willingness to be corrected by what is. And then finally, deciding. We don't just stop at saying this is so, we have to make a decision. We freely commit ourselves in light of what we have judged to be true and good. This is the level of value, the level of moral responsibility, the level where knowledge becomes action and insight becomes love in motion. And now, the key isn't just that these levels exist. The key is that they cooperate. They can correct one another. That is what makes human knowing normative. It isn't merely about cognition, it's about moral orientation. And Lonergan captures the whole structure in 4 imperatives. Be attentive, be intelligent, be reasonable, be responsible. Those 4 imperatives are how a person should live. An AI system can mimic the outputs associated with each of those levels. It can gather data, can find patterns, it can generate recommendations. It does not inhabit the drama of inquiry, truth-seeking, value commitment that those imperatives describe because the drama unfolds only in a subject who can care about truth, who can will the good, and who can choose to live according to that good. So, if we accept that, where does all this lead? It leads to what Lonergan calls self-appropriation. The moment when the subject begins to own this whole drama of consciousness. To appropriate yourself means to recognize from within what is actually going on when you know, when you choose, when you love. It is the inward discovery that I am the one who experiences, who inquires, who judges, who decides. The birth of moral awareness, the awakening of conscience. And out of that awareness comes what Lonergan calls authenticity. And that's a confusing term, and it's often really just mood in today's language. It isn't being true to yourself in the casual sense we so often hear, the slogan. No. It's not that version where authenticity means doing whatever feels natural, whatever impulse you have. For Lonergan, authenticity is fidelity. Fidelity to the pattern of attentive, intelligent, reasonable, responsible insights. Am I acting on what I know to be right? That's what it means to live as a conscious subject in pursuit of truth and goodness. Now contrast that with artificial systems. Even the most advanced AI doesn't appropriate anything. Doesn't know what it's doing. It doesn't reflect on its own processes. It doesn't wake up one morning and say, I should be more honest with my data analysis. AI doesn't discover a responsibility to truth. It optimizes. It maximizes gain and minimizes loss. It never faces the deeply human moment of conscience, that felt summons to live honestly and to align one's functions with one's values. That's the difference between an intelligent tool and an intelligent being. The former can calculate accuracy, the latter can seek truth. Now, that's a lot, so let me try to make this concrete with a thought experiment. The philosopher John Searle at Berkeley offered a famous thought experiment called the Chinese Room. It makes a very simple but I think profound point nonetheless. Just because a system produces the right answers doesn't mean it understands what it's saying. So imagine this. You're sitting in a locked room. You don't know a word of Chinese. Through a slot in the door, someone passes you cards covered in Chinese characters. Next to you is a massive code book with extremely detailed instructions. That is, if you see this symbol, respond with that one, right? You follow the rules perfectly. According to the rule book, you slide your responses out. The person outside, when they look at it, to them it looks like, well, you're fluent in Chinese. You have no idea what any of it means. You are manipulating symbols without understanding them. And that, Searle argues, is exactly what AI does. It produces correct outputs by following formal rules. It does not know anything about what those outputs mean. And Searle's point is actually quite simple. Syntax is not semantics. Processing symbols isn't the same thing as understanding their significance. Other thought experiments push the point further. Philosophers talked about zombies, and not the Hollywood kind. When they use that term, what they mean are beings who act exactly like humans, that are physically indistinguishable from us, yet entirely devoid of consciousness. Everything looks the same from the outside, but inside the zombie, there are no experiences, there's no awareness, there's no self. Or you can even think about reversibility. You could theoretically run a computer program backwards, getting the same pattern of inputs and outputs. Whatever experience you had living it forward would be gone. The flow of consciousness is irreducibly directional. It is lived in time. It's not computed. And all of this points to one conclusion. Computation may explain function. It cannot explain experience. It cannot describe the performance. It cannot describe the presence of a subject, the someone for whom the performance happens. And that is why, no matter how advanced AI becomes, it remains trapped on the outside of experience, forever imitating meaning without ever entering into it. And it's true, someone might push back. Someone might push back here saying, well, okay, wait a second. Isn't consciousness embodied? Don't we think with our brains and experience through our bodies? And the answer is yes, obviously, absolutely. And this is precisely the point. Human cognition, human consciousness, isn't some free-floating algorithm humming in an abstract space. It is embodied. Our minds are knit into the living, sensing, vulnerable realities of our bodies. Our flesh isn't a peripheral device that consciousness happens to us. It is part of who we are. Think about it. Through sensation and movement and touch and balance, even through things like pain and hunger and fatigue and fragility, we learn through those things what it means to be a self. Our identity is shaped by being in a body that feels and that desires and that gets tired, that can be wounded, and that can heal. Through proprioception, that is our awareness of where our body is in space, through homeostasis, our constant balancing act between comfort and discomfort, through vulnerability itself, we become the kind of being who can narrate the life, who can say, I am me. Machines can simulate some of that, yeah. They can replicate feedback loops that mimic sensory input. They can model motor control. But simulation is not sensation. You can't code the feeling of rain on your skin or the warmth of a friend's hand. And digital storage, no matter how vast or fast, is not memory in the autobiographical sense. A hard drive can retain data, it cannot remember, it cannot recall with longing, it cannot recall with regret. Those qualities, what philosophers called, as we mentioned in the first episode, qualia, that is the what it is like of an experience, aren't engineering artifacts. They are the marks of living presence, the felt interiority of a being who inhabits a body and the world. Consciousness is embodied in a way no machine can ever be. Embodiment is not about structure, or at least not just about structure. It's about life. So let's put the two architectures side by side for a moment. Machine learning generalizes from data. It means it finds patterns through statistical correlation. Give it enough examples, and it can predict, it can classify and generate what looks like creative output. It excels at exploiting patterns. That's what it does. It correlates. It calculates. It predicts. Human understanding is something else. It is intentional and insight-driven. We don't just notice patterns, we grasp meaning. We see context, we sense significance. When we understand something, it isn't just data aligning. It's a moment of illumination, no? That aha experience, the eureka, Archimedes, no? When the fog clears and everything just clicks together, we have encountered truth. No? A model can compose a sonnet about grief. It could be pretty good. It can reduce the rhythm, the metaphors, the sorrow in perfect iambic pentameter. But it has never grieved. It doesn't know what loss feels like. It doesn't know what grief asks of life, how it changes you, how it teaches you compassion. A model can uncover a scientific regularity in a data set. It never experiences the wonder that pulls the human mind toward deeper understanding. That pure, unrestricted desire to know, that feeling of a discovery that opens onto awe. A model can even rank moral options by precedent. This choice aligns with that rule, this one doesn't. It doesn't feel the weight of a vulnerable face. It doesn't sense the obligation to honor dignity when no one is watching. That's because understanding, real understanding, involves more than computation. It involves a set of self that only we have, that can be moved by meaning, that can be moved by truth, by beauty, by goodness. AI predicts patterns. Humans perceive purpose, and that's no small difference. That's a big chasm. It is the difference between a tool and a soul. And that naturally brings us into the conversation about moral agency, more directly, because this is where the question of personhood really comes to a head. Moral agency presupposes freedom, the genuine power to choose otherwise, not for the sake of efficiency or optimization, but for the sake of the good. To be free in the moral sense is to act under the light of value, to recognize what is right and to choose it, even when it costs you something, even when it costs you everything. Algorithms don't choose, they select. They operate according to objectives and constraints. They rank outcomes, they minimize errors, they maximize performance. And that is incredibly useful for solving technical problems. It is not the same thing as deliberation. Deliberation is personal. It happens in the space between conscience and action, in that tension where you ask yourself, what should I do? An AI never asks that question. It never experiences hesitation or temptation or the weight of responsibility. This is why when an AI system causes harm, we don't put the system on trial. Just like in the previous episode where we discussed the autonomous vehicle, we don't put the car on trial, we put the humans, right? We hold organizations accountable for how they deployed it, and we should. We don't ascribe guilt or merit to the tool itself. Responsibility belongs to the people who designed it, who trained it and use it. A machine can malfunction, obviously, but if you remember, it cannot sin. We said that it can be reprogrammed. We know it can, but it cannot repent. It can simulate reconciliation. It cannot forgive or be forgiven. Only persons can do that, because only persons live in the moral drama where freedom and conscience and grace all intersect, where our choices don't just change the world outside of us, but shape the kind of persons we are becoming. And that, again, is the point. AI acts. Only human beings own their actions. At the very heart of personhood is relation. Not just interaction, genuine relationship We are not made for isolation. We are made for communion. Love, in its deepest sense, isn't about exchange or function. It is about the overflowing of love, the mutual self-gift of persons to persons. Love isn't an output channel, a switch. It isn't something you produce as the result of a prompt or a program. Love is a free act. The act of oneself who recognizes another self and says, "Your good is my good, even at cost to myself." That's what the Greeks called agape, willing the good of the other for their own sake. Artificial systems can mimic some of that. They can model attachment. They can reproduce patterns of reciprocity. You smile, I smile. You share, I respond. Those patterns can feel real, very real. And they can feel very real, especially in a world where loneliness is rising, where we're looking for that because we are wired for that. But we have to be honest. And we know it deep down, a simulation of love is not a lover. There's no awareness behind it, no risk, no vulnerability. It's all performance without participation. And the danger is that we start to prefer that performance, to trade real relationship with all its unpredictability and messiness for something smoother and more controllable. A chatbot that always agrees with you, always listens, never interrupts, never disappoints. That's a friendlier package, no? To confuse the two is to cheapen love itself, because love requires freedom. It requires the courage to step into uncertainty and the willingness to be changed by another. If we forget that, we risk training ourselves to desire comfort over connection, the illusion of intimacy over the reality of relationship. Real love is mutual, it's vulnerable, and yes, it is unpredictable. And that is precisely what makes it divine. And I need to be fair, and I need to be fair for a moment, and we need to give credit where it's due. Contemporary research into consciousness is rich and fascinating. For those who have looked at it know that. There are computational theories of mind that argue consciousness could emerge from the right kind of information processing. There is embedded cognition, which emphasizes how thought is grounded in the body's interaction with the world. And then there's even the quantum theories of mind, that consciousness arises from the very structure of physical existence. Each of these attempts is serious, it's rigorous, it's worth engaging. They all share a common goal: to explain subjectivity, the feeling of being without accidentally smuggling it through the back door. And so far, none of them has managed to bridge what philosophers call the explanatory gap, the leap from functions to first-person experience. How do we move from neural firings or data flows or quantum states to the lived fact of I am? How do we get from electrical activity to awe, to sorrow, to wonder? No scientific model, no matter how sophisticated, has been able to cross that threshold. And that isn't a failure, no, but it's more of a recognition of what science does best. Science explains mechanisms, it does not exhaust mystery. And in that sense, today's AI remains what it has always been: narrow, task-bound, devoid of interior life. Its purpose is not to become conscious. Its purpose is to serve conscious beings. Its excellence lies not in replacing persons, but in serving them, in extending our reach and amplifying our intelligence, and, when it's guided by wisdom, freeing us to be more human rather than less. So, at last, we can ask and answer the question that has framed this entire video. Can AI ever be human? And the answer is no. The answer is no, because we're asking the wrong kind of thing to do the wrong kind of work. A human person isn't a collection of functions, not a sum of computations or patterns or predictable behaviors. A person is a subject, a self, someone who can inquire and understand and judge and decide, someone who can suffer and rejoice, someone who freely gives themselves in love. A person does not just process the world, a person participates in the world. A person doesn't just register beauty, they are moved by it. They don't just analyze truth, they are responsible to it. A machine can imitate the structure of these actions. It can simulate language, mimic emotion, approximate reasoning. It cannot live the drama of a moral and spiritual life. Tools cannot become subjects. And it's exactly here that it is crucial. Tools can be made wise by the subjects who design and use them. And that is where our hope lies. AI can never share our humanity. It can reflect our values. It can amplify our virtue or our vice, depending on the spirit with which we build and deploy it. So in other words, that means that the real question is not whether machines will become like us. The real question is whether we will remember who we are. So in the end, the task before us is not to manufacture persons. It is to become them, to live attentively, intelligently, reasonably, and responsibly in an age of powerful machines. That, in a sentence, is Lonergan's wisdom for the 21st century. The challenge of our time is not to build consciousness, it is to live consciously. If we can do that, if we can remain awake to truth, alive to beauty, and responsive to goodness, then AI can truly serve us. It can become a remarkable amplifier of human gifts, a mirror that reflects our creativity, our compassion, and even our capacity for wonder. Let's never mistake the mirror for the light. The machine may multiply what we do, it can never replace who we are. Our vocation, yours, mine, humanity's, is to ensure that in all our brilliance, we do not forget our wisdom. That in building the most powerful tools the world has ever seen, we do not lose sight of the one thing no machine will ever replicate, the mystery of the person. If we live that truth, AI will not diminish us. It'll serve us. It will extend the reach of our love and deepen our responsibility to one another. And perhaps that is the most fitting measure of progress. Not what our machines can do, but what kind of people we become as we build them. In the first video, we asked what AI is, and today we've asked what it cannot be. In the next video, I want to flip the question inside out. If machines cannot become persons by scaling computation, can persons be reduced to machines by scaling intervention? What happens when the technologies move inside the body, the human body, inside the nervous system, inside the memory and the mood? And that's the territory of neurotechnology, and it raises a question even sharper than the one about AI, not whether machines will become like us, but whether we will begin to think of ourselves as a machine. That is the next video. Until then.